Cold Bananas Show. I'm John Hansen.
I'm Michael Ollinger.
And in this episode, we're going to take a look at some of the notable movies from the month of July, starting with the big 20th movie in the MCU, Ant-Man and the Wasp, a sequel to the 2015 movie Ant-Man.
Yeah, and I have to say, this was a nice change of pace. After the operatic intensity of Infinity War, it was nice to kind of cool down into a sort of nifty little superhero story with slightly lower stakes and with more of a sense of fun throughout. This movie had a lot less heavy lifting to do, and in that way it sort of continued to serve the purpose that the first movie in the Ant-Man saga served, which is to sort of be like the jester of the MCU almost. This movie is sort of the comic relief of the larger MCU. And in that regard, I think it works really well. I think this holds its own with the first Ant-Man.
Okay, and what's your rating?
I would say that I would probably give this about a 3.5 or 4. Let's go with 4. I'll go 4 bananas on this.
Okay. I liked it a lot, too. One thing I disagree with you a little bit on is how substantial it is. I think, they did a great job in the first movie of introducing the rules of how they can get bigger and smaller when they're wearing the suits, and also those discs they have that can make other things bigger and smaller. And it's just, like you say, it's a lot of fun just to see the action sequences with those rules. There's no other action movie I can think of that operates quite the same way an Ant-Man picture does. At the same time, they introduced the quantum realm, which I think is possibly going to be crucial in the wider MCU saga. But for now, we can say it's a fun movie, and I also give it 4 bananas.
Okay.
Now up next is a movie called 8th Grade. It's the writer-director debut by Bo Burnham, who was part of the comedy troupe in last summer's big comedy film, The Big Sick. But here he's not in the movie. He wrote and directed it. And what were your thoughts on 8th Grade, Michael?
I thought that it was spectacular. Right now, after having little less than a week to reflect on what I've seen, right now it's my choice for the best movie of 2018. Bo Burnham does such a good job of capturing sort of an awkward adolescence and this idea or the mindset of somebody who feels like they don't fit in, who's just trying so hard not to be noticed by the people around them because they're like, oh my god, I'm going to feel judged. At the same time, they're reaching out in like the one avenue that they have available to them. So it sort of is this great coming of age story. It also does a great job of explaining the importance in today's society of social media, of online communications, of stuff like YouTube, because there are plenty of people who like to shout those things down as like cautionary tales, like be afraid of what could happen. But this shows how, for somebody who has a hard time connecting, those things can provide an outlet, can provide a way for them to communicate, because the lead character does sort of use YouTube as kind of like a crutch. And it could be argued whether or not that's a good thing, but it does get her through to a point where she's able to maybe find herself throughout the story. And so I think that's very important. I think that the character dynamics between the daughter and the father, between the different cliques in the school, and just, it's incredibly poignant character study beyond anything that it could be saying about social media or about awkward adolescence. It's just a very sensitive, very perceptive character study. And is quite unbelievable just how good it is.
What's your rating?
This would be a 5. 5 out of 5. This is a bunch of bananas for me.
Well, I tell you, I liked it a lot too. And, You mentioned that you felt it wasn't a cautionary tale about social media, and certainly there's one key friend that she meets toward the end of the film that she does meet through social media. And so I can see that argument. At the same time, I feel like some of the other connections she makes are more traditional, like the scene where she's pacing back and forth, talking to a potential friend that she could hang out at the mall with. I felt like was kind of a timeless throwback. That's just one of the themes of eighth grade. I tell you, what an assured debut from Bo Burnham, his first major picture. We're going to be following his work for a long time. One of the tricks he does is he brings us right into the sphere of Kayla, the main character. And it's not that, you've seen reviews that say you'll fall in love with this character. Yes, you will, but it's not because she's perfect. It's because you're right there with her. The camera's there on her all the time. She has a lot of flaws.
Yeah, and I'm willing to bet that, because it's weird to say, talking about a movie that's main focus is a middle school girl, but I certainly saw a lot of myself in Kayla, and I'm sure that a lot of people are going to feel the same way, because, some of the insecurities that she feels are universal, right. And this movie does such a good job of having that sort of character connection it's so easy you fall in love with her, I think, because you empathize with her so much.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's definitely universal, and it's extremely funny as well. And I also give it 5 bananas, and it's the best movie I've seen this year as well. Now moving on to a movie that has at least one thing in common with eighth grade. It's not a sequel. It's the latest film from The Rock, Skyscraper.
Yes, absolutely. And as previously mentioned when I was talking about eighth grade, there are 7 or 8 movies that I would put on my best of the year list, and Skyscraper is definitely not one of them. This is a completely paint-by-numbers, towering inferno, die-hard ripoff. It is very, very generic. Just about the only thing I can say to praise it is that they actually do give Neve Campbell some agency in fighting back in this movie, so it's not just The Rock saving the damsel in distress. Don't get me wrong, that's there. But, they do give Neve Campbell some agency, some ability to kick ass, and that's pretty cool. Other than that, this movie is just straight up generic. Terrorists take over a building, they want to burn it down for reasons, and The Rock has to stop them. I wasn't bored for portions of it, but I was bored for other portions of it. So I would say I would give this maybe 2 bananas, and that's generous.
Okay. Now here's a movie that is going to be a little bit more complicated to talk about than Skyscraper. Sorry to Bother You.
Yes, this is the writing and directing debut of Boots Riley, who is a hip-hop performer, hip-hop artist, and it stars Lakeith Stanfield, has a cameo appearance from Danny Glover. Tessa Thompson is in this, and Armie Hammer in a really cool role, as well as the voices of Patton Oswalt and David Cross. And it is, as far as debuts go, it is just about as assured as 8th grade, but it steps far more out there onto the ledge conceptually and takes a lot of chances, a lot of risks, and they all pay off. It basically is reinventing itself in every act, becoming more and more far-flung of a satire. And eventually, without spoiling anything, going into some downright freaky science fiction territory for its satire. And it always pays off. The messaging is always spot on, very, very clear what Boots Riley is trying to say. It kind of plays like I would say a key influence on it might be something along the lines of Do the Right Thing, because it's sort of about watching social unrest come to a boil in a way, except that it takes that extra sci-fi horror jump, and it's very, very clever, very, very funny. So this would be probably my second bunch of bananas for July.
Okay. And now moving on to another blockbuster, Mission Impossible Fallout, the sixth movie in the franchise, which seems just like its star to be aging quite well.
Yeah, and at this point, I mean, this movie kind of loses a step from Ghost Protocol, which is, I think, the high point of the series so far. It's about on level with Rogue Nation, which was also written and directed by the same person, Christopher McQuarrie. It is really thrilling. The action set pieces are like armrest gripping, like it's edge of your seat, typical like Mission Impossible fashion. They're very, very well constructed. It takes a little bit of time, I feel like, to really get going, as compared to the last couple of entries, but it's still a lot of fun, and great chemistry between all the leads. They finally pay off Michelle Monaghan's storyline in this one. They do a great job of bringing back the villain from 5 and having a good place for him in this one. Henry Cavill does a great job as well. So, I mean, it pretty much just lives up to the standards set by the later half of the Mission Impossible franchise. And so I would say this is, I mean, Ghost Protocol is, I think, one of the best action movies ever made. If Rogue Nation is 4.5 bananas, this would probably be 4. That's not to say that there's anything particularly wrong with it. It's just sort of a half step behind, but it's definitely worth seeing.
All right, so for the month of July, strong recommendations for 8th grade and Sorry to Bother You. Softer recommendations for Ant-Man and the Wasp and Mission Impossible Fallout, and stay far away from Skyscraper.
Yes. When it's 2 a.m. on the USA Network, that's when you watch Skyscraper. Don't pay money to see it in a theater.
Okay, understood. All right, thanks, Michael, and thank you for joining us this month. We'll see you next time.